Today we're gonna make apple cinnamon rolls. It's the perfect, soft, tender cinnamon roll dough that is rolled up with not only cinnamon roll filling, but also a cinnamon apple compote that is still kind of like a little bit crunchy and is perfectly sweet with an additional little bit of cinnamon, so that all together you have this perfect yeasted roll. And then we've got a cream cheese glaze on the top for that just like extra decadent cinnamon roll flair. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to hit the subscribe button below and click the bell icon to be notified every time I post a new and delicious recipe. Let's get into it. So I've got my milk that's been warmed. It's a little warmer than body temperature, which just means, you know, it feels warm, not hot. If it feels hot, then you need to let it cool down or add a little cold milk and then re-measure. So it's about 105, 110. And then I've got dry active yeast, not instant yeast. I do not like what it does to the cinnamon rolls, so I do not use instant yeast. I think it makes them a little like, you know, it gives them a weird texture, to be honest. It's like there's too much yeast in there. So anyways, give them a whisk in your milk. All right, so now we're gonna let this sit for about 10 minutes. Let the yeast get hydrated and active. They're gonna start to bubble. You'll see kind of like, you know, little bubbles of, you know, kind of yeasty material, if you will, that's like coming to the surface. And that's when you know that you're ready to mix your dough. While we wait, so we are gonna go ahead and add the rest of our ingredients into our bowl. This is AP flour. And then we're gonna kind of keep everything separate, mostly just the egg. We don't want the egg to be next to the sugar and the salt because it'll start to kind of pull the moisture from the egg and denature the proteins, and we don't want that. So I make like a little kind of hole over here, a little space for it to live. And then I put my egg in my bowl on her lonesome, and my sugar and salt. It's kosher salt, very important. And then this is butter that's been softened. It's about room temperature. It's not, you know, I'm just gonna let it kind of plop in there. You could hold, it is a decent amount of butter, so it's kind of like a brioche in a way. So if you want to develop your gluten and then add your butter, that is totally fine as well. So we're just gonna let that sit there, and we are going to wait on our yeast. All right, so our yeasties are ready. I'm gonna try and move them carefully so you can see them, because sometimes if you move them too abruptly, the bubbles kind of fall to the bottom, but you can see that they're nice and bubbly. There's little kind of like, you know, almost like lava has kind of risen to the surface. So she's ready. So let's go ahead and pop all of this in here. And then we are gonna just mix it in the mixer. You know, I like to start the incorporation of my doughs with the paddle attachment, and this is no different. So go ahead and just kind of turn it on, kind of medium-low, I mean, it's pretty low. You know, of course, you're hydrating the gluten, so it is gonna start developing while you're mixing it and while you're incorporating it with the paddle, but obviously we're making a dough and we want that gluten development, so we're not concerned. All right. So we've got a nicely incorporated dough. It's already started some gluten development. I'm just gonna scrape off my paddle attachment here and attach my dough hook. Let's go ahead and incorporate. So we're gonna turn this up to medium, and we're just gonna mix it until, you know, a smoother dough forms. This mixer is a little large for this batch size, so it's not going to behave exactly as it would in a smaller mixer, where it will definitely climb the paddle and become a really nice dough. It's just this mixer is a little larger. So. Right. So it started to kind of pull away from the sides of the bowl. It's still a very scraggly looking dough. You see how it'll kind of come together like a dough, but you see how rough it is. So obviously it's not done. This is an enriched dough, and we put all of the butter in to begin with, so it's going to take a little bit longer than you might expect. But it's it's still gonna be a beautiful, workable dough. Okay, let's give her a check in here. Pull our mass out so you can see it's nicer than before. You see how tight that is. Let's see if we can pull a window pane. It is a stickier dough because it is a higher hydration dough, much like my other sourdough, the sourdough cinnamon rolls. This is a little less sticky than that dough, but still on the stickier side. Okay, so you see how I'm able to start to pull that window, but it, you know, I can't pull it perfectly without some gluten strands. It still looks a little like knotted, right? Like knotty wood. And so I'm gonna go ahead and continue to mix it, develop that gluten just a little bit more. It's looking like it's such a nice dough in there. It's looking a whole lot smoother. She's living her best life. Now, it is not going to take that long because, you know, she was almost there to begin with. You do not want to overdevelop gluten. If you overdevelop gluten, then your structure will fall apart. I know, it's so counterintuitive, but true. So, our dough is beautiful. I'm going to go ahead and get this, you know, kind of spread out my oil. And then I am going to use this oil to oil my hands, right? So go ahead and grab your dough and pull it off of the dough hook and scrape out my bowl. Now I've got my dough here. Now I'm going to do something that I don't usually do, which is I am actually going to fold this. So I'm going to put this here and then I'm going to give it a quick fold. This is just kind of my final step of, you know, working that gluten without doing so in the mixer. So I am just folding each side into the center, okay, and just doing that, and then I'm going to flip it over seam side down. Do you see how beautifully smooth that is? This is a lovely dough, and so we are just going to let her kind of bulk proof in a warm spot for about 30 minutes, and then we're ready to roll and assemble. I know. So while our dough is proofing, I realized that I needed a little bit more time because I would technically have done this step ahead of time if I weren't filming. And so I actually put my dough in the refrigerator to proof, which is going to slow it down just enough, hopefully, for us to make our compote and cool it and get it ready to roll up into our filling. So here we are, compote. So let's peel our apples. I've got a mixture of Glaze and Honeycrisp here. You can use whatever you'd like. Of course, you know, a nice mixture, a nice variety is good for texture and flavor, but it really is whatever you'd like. You want to try and use kind of crisp, tender apples. So, you know, your Glaze, your Fujis, your Cortlands, you know, things like that. Last one. So go ahead and take your apple peels. And then let's trade our peeler for a knife. And we're just going to slice our apples in half. And then I kind of cut them in half, and then I slice out the core. So there's a nice flat bottom, and each one's about the same size. Well, it would be the same size if my apples were the same size, which they are clearly not. So just repeat with all of your apples. Get your apples, of course, into the garbage. So my apples are really small, so it's not really lending itself to this, but I'm going to cut each one basically kind of in half long ways, right? So because of our cinnamon rolls, we're going to want, you know, these to be in like nice kind of a nice bite-sized piece. So I'm going to do kind of a medium dice. So I'm just slicing each one in half long ways, and that is going to give me kind of that really nice, you know, that nice size. And so once we've done that, we're going to go back and we're going to cut kind of strips, if you will, and then we're going to cut them into cubes. So that's obviously how we dice, right? So I'm going to do all of them into strips, and then I'm going to go back and cut them into cubes. All right, so now we're going to take these. I've kept them kind of all facing this way to make it easier for me to slice them into the dice. But you know, you kind of just like corral them. There's some smaller pieces because of the size of our apples, but you know, they're really yummy in season apples, and so we're not going to complain. All right, so we are going to put our apples directly into our pot. So find yourself an appropriately sized pot. I thought this was appropriately sized, but now I'm like, maybe it's just a little small. And then we're just going to clean up here just a little bit. I'm going to, before I dispense with this, I'm going to squeeze my lemon. So it's about half of a regular sized lemon, which for once I actually have regular sized lemon. So we're just going to go ahead and squeeze this in there. Okay, and now we're going to add our seasonings, if you will. So I've got granulated sugar and light brown sugar. You can use 100% of either. I've split it between the two because I didn't want that overwhelming kind of light brown sugar flavor. I want the apples to kind of shine. And then I've got myself a little bit of cinnamon here. So I'm going to go ahead and put cinnamon. This, of course, is to your taste. So let's go ahead and give this a stir. I don't know why I'm looking in there like anything's in there. It's not. So give it a stir. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and pop this on. The kind of medium low. We want it to kind of, you know, release some of their juices. We want it to start to simmer before it really fully boils. And then we're gonna, we're basically gonna cook it until our apples are beautifully tender. So that's what we're doing. So it's been about 8 minutes, and you can see that a lot of the juices have evaporated. So, but my apples are not quite ready. So you can kind of see that they're still a little crunchy. None of them are translucent or anything. And then some of that will depend on the apples that you choose in your mix. But I would like them to cook a little bit more. They're still a little crunchier than I'd like without reducing any of that juice. So I've reduced my heat to low, and I'm going to let that continue to cook. Okay, so we've uncovered, and a lot of the apples have softened. You can see that the syrup has thickened again because they released a little bit more juices, and you can see that they're nice and syrupy. And then the apples themselves they're this beautiful kind of crisp tender. So we want to cool this quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pop this. I've got a sheet pan in here. Hold on. So my baking sheet is already cold, and I'm going to go ahead and you could put parchment, you could put plastic wrap down, whatever you'd like. And I'm just going to go ahead and take my apple compote and kind of pour it out onto my baking sheet here. So I'm going to pop this in the refrigerator because obviously our cinnamon rolls dough is still in there. It's doing really well, but I'd say it's about 75% of the way, and so we want to make sure this cools as rapidly as possible. So into the refrigerator she goes, and obviously that's why I pre-cooled my tray. So we want to give her every possible benefit. All right, so everything is ready for us to start assembling our cinnamon rolls. Our dough has doubled. Obviously she was in the refrigerator because I needed to make the apple compote and cool it. So I needed a little bit more time than I would usually be afforded by the 30-minute bulk proof if you just kept it at room temperature. So this took about an hour and a half. I did pull it out of the refrigerator after 15 minutes before this moment to give her a little time to warm up and come to room temperature. So she's beautiful, she's ready. And then we've got everything for our filling. So we could just use our cinnamon apples here, but I feel that the best part about a cinnamon roll is all that cinnamon filling. So we're still gonna put the cinnamon filling into our rolls. In my bowl here, I've got dark brown sugar. I'm gonna add a little bit of cinnamon here. And by a little bit, I mean a lot. And then this is softened butter. Do you see how soft and pliable that is? It is not melted. Melted butter does not have the same properties as, you know, kind of softened or regular butter, but, you know, you really need, it's key. Otherwise the filling will melt out, or it will not spread. So these are the things that can happen if your butter is not at the proper temperature. So go ahead and we're just gonna mix all of that together. Okay, so you see how we have a nice paste here, and this is going to kind of spread nicely. All right, so I've gotten myself a rolling pin and some bench flour, so we're gonna go ahead and spread a little bench flour on our bench, and then also on our dough. Now my dough is cold still, so it is going to be a lot easier to work with than a room temperature dough that has not been chilled. So if that is something that works for you, if you would like a little bit of an easier dough to work with, then one way to do that is to pop it in the refrigerator and cool it down. So go ahead and give a little bench flour on the back here. And then I am gonna go ahead and grab my ruler. We are going to roll this to 12 inches by 10 inches. And you know, it is kind of critical, it is mission critical that it is the right size, otherwise the ratio of dough to filling will not be right. So it's really, you know, common sense. So we're gonna go ahead and roll this out. This dough rolls very nicely, so I am not, you know, I don't have to push it very hard. I am gonna try and keep it in a rectangle, which is always tricky. And we are almost there here. Yep, right there. Okay, so that is our 10-inch rectangle, and then we're gonna go the other way. We are going to get it to 12 inches. I mean, there's nothing super tricky about this. It is a lot easier to work with because she is cold. So, all right. Now we have our rectangle, and we're super proud of ourselves. And we are ready to add our filling. And the easiest way to do this is to kind of dollop it all about. So I'm just gonna, without further, I mean, there's no fuss, no muss here. I'm just kind of, you know, whatever. Yep. I know, who am I even today? Okay, now I've gotten this all nice. Now my dough is cold, so this is, again, is going to spread easier than if it's not cold. So don't be sitting here looking at me being like, what? Mine didn't spread that easily. Now, what you do want to do is, I do find it easier, especially when the dough is not chilled, to roll using, to spread it using my finger. Yeah, I know. So it is a lot, for some reason, I find maybe it pulls less. Okay. All right, so anyways, as we were, it's about, you know, you can use as much or as little apple filling as you like. It's really to your taste, right? So if you want, you know, more apples in there, go ahead. Nothing is gonna keep you from having the apple cinnamon rolls that you want. So this is one of my recipes for apple compote, like a one-time batch. And it will give you a nice coverage. But if you were going to maybe reduce the cinnamon sugar topping, you might want to double it. You know, I would want to double it. So we are ready to roll. Before we do so, I'm going to spray, just because I know my hands are going to get dirty again. So I'm going to go ahead and give my baking dish a spray, and then we're going to roll. So we're going to start on one side, the long ways, and then go ahead and kind of just flip it in. Now, it is a little bit trickier to roll because of the apples, but not much, right? Not much. You do want to make it a little, you know, you want to make it a little tighter, like you want to spiral, and if you don't roll tightly, then you won't really get a spiral. Okay, here we go. Look at this.
this, my lovelies. Oh, they are so pudgy, so delightful. Like, look at this right here. All right, you see how it got a little longer? That's cool. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go in half and then half, like we're going, you know, we're not gonna worry about sizings. It's really, because sometimes the dough stretches more than you'd like. So just kind of, you know, eyeball your center here. And then I'm gonna do, you know, I am gonna do 8. I'm gonna do 8 really fat rolls. And I'm like really stoked about it. But you could certainly cut this into 12. I have made 12 with the same size dough. You just need to cut each half into 6. So it's really up to you and how large you want each of your cinnamon rolls to be, because obviously today I'm like, I want them to be large and in charge. Yes. So we've got our cinnamon rolls and we are going to kind of flip them up and place them in. You want to give them a little bit of space. Obviously these are kind of chubby. Oh my gosh, look at this. These are gorgeous. Gorgeous rolls. All right, into the corner he goes. Wow, we've got ourselves a serious breakfast situation. Now, I'm gonna cover this in plastic wrap, and then I'm gonna pop it in a warm space, which is really just my windowsill. It is gonna final proof about 30 to 45 minutes. It really depends. Obviously my dough, I mean, she's warmed up now, but if she were still cold, it would take closer to 45 an hour. But again, just pop them in the window and let them rise. These are probably gonna take about 30 to 45. And I'm just checking for them to be kind of puffed visibly and for them to have kind of risen. They're not gonna rise up, they have a lot of space, so they're gonna rise out and up a little bit. So that's what I'm gonna be looking for, and we'll check back in. Okay, so it has been actually pretty much exactly 30 minutes, and you can see that our rolls have puffed. You can see that they look like they're visibly puffed in every single layer. If you do not appropriately proof them, then they will be doughy and kind of just tough and not enjoyable to eat. So you do want to make sure that you proof them appropriately. So I'm going to go ahead and pop these in the oven that I've preheated to 350 degrees convection or 350 regs, doesn't matter. And we're going to go ahead and they're going to bake probably 12 to 15 minutes, maybe closer to 18. It really depends. There's some space between them, so they might bake a little faster. So I'm going to use a cake tester to make sure that they are not doughy in the center before I take them out, because nobody wants doughy cinnamon rolls. All right, they're out. So they baked 19 minutes. When I stuck them with the cake tester at 18, they still had like a little bit of dough just on the bottom, and so you obviously want to make sure that that comes out clean. So all they needed was just another minute. So you can see that our filling is obviously come down and it's bubbling, but you can see that a lot of it has stayed in our rolls, which is critical. So we are going to let these cool, I mean, probably about 30 minutes. If you're going to serve these immediately, you can totally do that. You can put your glaze on, maybe make it a little thicker so that it runs. You can 100% serve these right now, but if you can also kind of let them cool, glaze them, and then serve them. So let's just go ahead and get these back there and make our glaze. So we are going to make a cream cheese glaze, which is delightful. Because of the cream cheese, it will not ever kind of set completely. So if you're looking for a glaze that sets a little bit more, try the glaze from my sourdough cinnamon rolls. I'll also drop the link below so that you can, you know, do what you need to do. In my bowl, I have confectioner sugar, and I'm going to add a bit of vanilla extract. And then I'm going to add my cream cheese. Now this is very soft. I softened it in the microwave. You can also just let it sit at room temperature, but if your room is not warm, then that won't work. So go ahead and get that into your other bowl. And then I'm going to start with about a tablespoon of milk. So you want to try and start to work it in there. We are looking for more of a, a paste, a little bit like slightly pourable, but not, super duper liquidy. But if you are going to glaze your cinnamon rolls afterwards, you might want them to, like after they cool completely, you might want the glaze to be a little thinner so that they spread nicer. It's totally up to you and what you are doing. So that's obviously too thick and a little bit chunky. So go ahead and just add a little bit more milk. If you're super concerned about the lumps or you don't want to work them out, then obviously sifting your confectioner sugar would be very helpful here. All right, so we've got, let's see, what do we have here? We've got, it's, that's a nice thick glaze. I do want it to go on the cinnamon rolls a little thicker, so I think that's going to be perfect. That was 1.5 tablespoons, in case you want to know exactly. Now we're gonna cover this and we're gonna let it wait. We're gonna wait until our cinnamon rolls are cool enough. So probably still another like 25 minutes. That's it. All right, it is time to glaze. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just pour some of this beautiful cream cheese glaze on here. Try and like not, I don't want too much in one spot. So just kind of, and then just kind of like spread it out. This way you kind of know how much more you need. If you need more, you can kind of, redistribute as needed. Which obviously this one was sorely, overlooked. Yum. Who's excited? I am. But the great thing is, it's time to try. I know. So let's see, what kind of tool are we going to use to get out of here? I think we're going to use a fish spatula. I find this very helpful. It's a nice corner piece right here. It's also the smallest of the bunch, so, easier to get out. I like to kind of free him and then pop it out. What is up, cinnamon roll? What is up? Look at that monstrous awesomeness. Okay. Look at the bottom. See how it's nice and like it's just moist and like beautiful from all of the juices from the apple and then also the cinnamon sugar filling. It's just kind of like soaked into the cinnamon bun on the bottom, but also stayed inside where we wanted it in the first place. Guys, these cinnamon rolls are magical. It was a generous bite. Oh my god, it's so good, it's overwhelming. The dough is soft and actually really flavorful on its own. It's tender and delicate, and then it's nicely leavened, so it's not too dense or thick. And then you've got like the perfect amount of the cinnamon sugar filling inside, as well as kind of like has collected on the bottom and almost caramelized, almost like a sticky bun in a way, but not. And then you got like the nice bite of the apples that are still crunchy, and like they're soft and tender and crunchy. You get like the apple and the cinnamon, and then the cinnamon roll and like the cream cheese frosting, and like, it's overwhelming, is it not? In the best way. This is how I choose to be overwhelmed. Extra cinnamon. Holy wow. So good.